Hi everybody, Nick here again with Creation Army TV. Thanks for watching. Here's another tutorial today it's going to be kind of fun, and it's going to introduce you to some of the basics of making nice reflective surfaces, texture that might look like French fries. Here's the final product. Now, I made this animation recently after going to, probably a couple weeks ago, my wife and I went to Red Robin for some burgers, and everybody knows about their delicious golden bottomless steak fries at Red Robin. Red Robin, if you're listening, I am open to being a sponsor and receiving said French fries for free. And anyway, I was looking at her plate of food, and there was this beautiful chrome cup with these dimples in it, and the top was tilted, and it was full of their golden delicious bottomless steak fries. So we took a quick picture, and I kind of filed it in the back of my head, and I said, I think I can model that in Cinema 4D and create sort of a promo for their bottomless fries. So right now in Cinema, I'll walk you through some of the basics of using a Loft NURBS to make this chrome object, and then later on we'll talk about some of the fries. So I've pulled up some source imagery here so we can look at the texture of the fries, and we can simulate that in Cinema. So let's get started. We jump into Cinema, and the first thing we want to do is create a circle. So from my shape layers, I'm going to create a circle, and this is going to represent the bottom of the fry cup. I could just rotate it, but I want to pick the circle here, and in the Properties tab, I'll go to Object, and I'll make its axis along the X and Z. That way it's flat on the ground. And I don't want it to be 200 centimeters. I like to work at scale, proper scale, real life scale. Things render a little bit faster when you actually make things at scale, in case you didn't know that. I'm guessing here, just by looking at the picture and being there in real life, that the bottom of the cup is about maybe 6 or 8 centimeters. So I'll just dial in 8 centimeters here for the size. And of course it gets way small, so I'll zoom in. So that's going to be the bottom of our cup. I will go ahead and name that bottom. So I've named my bottom as bottom, and what I'm going to do is just duplicate it. I'll hit E for the move tool, and I'm going to move it along the y-axis, and I'll hold Control to duplicate it. So this is going to be the start of our top. And I'm going to place these two objects inside of Loft NURBS. First, I'm going to make the top a little bit bigger, maybe 11 centimeters, to simulate the sort of conical shape of the cup. So we can orbit around, and we can see that it's probably not high enough. That probably looks fine, but it's easily adjustable. Now, if you've never used a Loft NURBS are great for making these kinds of surfaces. A Loft NURB you can think of like an airplane wing or like a tent. Your tent that you go camping in is held up by sticks, but the actual skin of the tent is, usually made of nylon or something like some weatherproof material, and so the tent gets its shape from the sticks and the skin around it. So you can find your Loft NURBS here in your NURBS panel. So I'll use Loft, and I'll take these two shapes and I'll put them inside. And right away we can see that we have sort of this trash can shape. And we can also see that the subdivision is quite low. You can actually see the edges here. So I'm going to take my mesh subdivision along the U-axis, and I'm going to increase that number, and you can see that it starts to smooth out. I'll put that up to about 100, and I'm not going to mess with anything else right now. But this isn't quite correct. This isn't what we're looking for. This is like a solid piece of metal. It doesn't really have an interior at this point. So we need a few more shapes. Loft NURBS are great because you can put as many shapes as you want into them, and it will create that skin that I was just mentioning. So I'm going to take this top shape right here, and I'm going to duplicate it again. You can either use the arrows on the shape, or you can duplicate it in the object panel. So I'll name it, and I'll name it top inner. This is going to be the shape that actually kind of goes inward at the top. I'm shrinking it right now. along the X and Z axis, and you can actually start to see that an interior is kind of taking shape. I don't want it to be too small, like a ceramic cup, but I just want it to be just a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to call it bottom inner. And this I'm going to move all the way to the bottom of the cup. We can orbit around, and I want it to be just above the bottom, just above it. Okay, and I'm going to shrink this one down as well, so that it's smaller than the original bottom. So there's our cup. It has a little bit of volume now to it. You can see it has a lip. The cup in real life is much thinner than that, of course. I can simulate that if I want to by, again, adjusting the top inner scale. So I can bring this out, and now we have something that looks sort of like one of those, sort of like the Mac trash can icon, something like that. There we go. But in real life, the cup is actually tilted. The top two rings, top inner and top, are tilted. So I'm going to use the rotate tool, hit R with these two shapes selected, and rotate them a little bit this way. And you can see that the Loft NURBS is skinning everything I do very nicely. So there's the top edge of my fry cup. Now the next step is making these divots on the side of the cup. Some people would say that you could probably just use a material editor to go ahead and make like a chrome surface and then put dimples in it, but that's going to actually not work too well, because it's going to give us dimples on the inside of the cup, and we might end up seeing the inside of the cup in the final animation, and I want the inside of the cup to be nice and smooth. I only want them on the outside. So what I'm going to do is just make one sphere and clone it all over the outside to give it those nice dimples. I'll do that by pulling a sphere out of my shape menu, and right away, of course, it's very, very large. It's 100 centimeters. I want, as far as segments go, I want there to be about 40 segments, and I want the sphere itself to be about 1 centimeter. Zoom way back in, and I'll just move it to the side so we can see what we're dealing with. Here is the start of one of the divots or dimples in the side of the cup. I think as far as scale, it's pretty good right now. Okay. The next thing I want to do is convert it to an editable object by hitting C on the keyboard. And then I'm going to hit T so I can squish it along the Z-axis a little bit. So it starts to look a little bit more like an M&M or a button. So something like that. This is going to be the start of this is going to be our divot, basically. And I'll name it divot. Or, yeah, divot. I was going to say dimple. Either way. So I just moved it to the side just so I could edit it, but eventually it's going to be moved in. So how do we make this into divots around the cup? I'm going to pull out the array NURBS and drop the divot into the array. And where did it go? Well, array by default gives you a 250 centimeter wide array. You can see the dimples or the divots floating way out here in space. I'm going to pull that in to about 8 centimeters. Remember, the bottom of our cup was 8 centimeters, so it should match up pretty well. So that's where our dimples are, and I will actually push the radius out a little bit just for now so we can see what we're doing. My divot, as you can see on this one, is not sharing the same angle as the cup. I want them to be tilted at the same angle, but if I choose divot inside of my array and hit R to rotate the divot, it's actually out here, you'll see that nothing happens. It seems tilted. It seems like I'm turning it in different directions, but the copies don't do that. And the reason is, once something is in the array, you have to enable axis editing in order to be able to turn your item, and then you'll see it be cloned in the array. So I've tilted my original divot to hopefully the correct angle, and then I'm going to come out of axis mode. Back to editing the array, I'm going to bring the radius down about 8.5 or just something until this divot barely touches the metal surface, maybe about 8.2. There we go. And I'm going to move the array in an upward direction because I want the dimples to be completely touching the metal and not falling off the bottom edge. So there we go. Now they sort of look like rivets at this point, and these are, you know, positive volume, and they're supposed to be taking away volume from the cup. So first thing I'll do is I'll increase the number of copies. They seem to be in real life a little bit closer together. All right, so there we have some dimples cutting into the, divots cutting into the cup. I'm gonna maybe increase the radius to about 8.3, sorry. And now these will be cutting in to the surface of the cup. Also with the ray, you can see in the original that there's a little bit of randomness to the position of the dimples. I want a little bit of randomness as well, so I'm going to increase the amplitude of the array, and what that is going to do is it's going to push some objects up and some objects down along a sine curve. You can see several 15 that I want to make. So some of them are pushed up and some down. I only want maybe about 1/4 centimeter of push. And then, so that's my first array. I'm going to make that, say, array 1. And then I'm going to basically duplicate it. Now, I'm going to duplicate the array, but here's something to look out for. Not only are the divots falling too far into the cup right now because the array doesn't have a large enough radius, which you can solve by making that larger, but also, if I decide that my divot is not the correct shape or size later on, I have to work on that one, and then I have to work on that one, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to make several shapes that are all different. So what I want to do is make one shape that's easily controllable, and then all the other divots are basically identical instances of that. So to do that, select divot, and then we're going to use from this panel, we're going to use instance. So that'll give us divot instance, and I'm going to put that inside the array. Now, if I alter the original divot in any way, remember you have to use axis mode, now all of them, even ones in different arrays and different groups, will follow the same transformation. So that's very important. So getting back to array number 2, this is the second line of divots or dimples, and we'll move this up slightly. I'm going to add a little bit of variation by adding one more. Maybe I'll rotate this a tiny bit and so on. I'm going to make all of my copies right now, and we're just going to fast forward a little bit, so bear with me. Okay, I've made all of my arrays. I've sort of given them a little bit of random angles by twisting some of them and adding more copies of the divot to others. And I'm at a point now where I've got this cylinder and it sort of looks like it's covered in buttons. And of course that's not what we're going for. What we're going for is dimples. We're going for, you know, subtraction of shape. So how do we do that? We do that with the Boolean NURB, which is located here in this panel. I'm going to use Boolean. What Boolean allows you to do is take two shapes, your A and your B shape, and it allows you to create different intersection types. You can make one shape subtract from another one or add to another one. You can basically create a hole in something with a Boolean, or you can make it so that only two shapes intersection shows, things like that. It's a lot like the Pathfinder palette in Illustrator, if you're familiar with that. The problem with Boolean, not the problem, but the key to remember about Boolean is that you can only put an A and a B object in it. I have an A, a B, a C, a D, E, and F. I have many objects, and this, of course, is my cup. I'll name it cup. So if I put all of these in the Boolean, it won't work. It's only really going to look at the first two objects and do my transformation there. So I'm going to take all of these arrays, which are my dimples, and I'm going to group them together. Basically, I'm just right-clicking and hitting group, and I'm going to name this, divots, not dimples. I keep saying dimples. And I'm going to, now I have an A and B object. I have my divots in my cup. So I'm going to put those inside of the Boolean. and you should notice right away that things start to render quite slowly. And you might get this problem where your object disappears altogether. With the Boolean selected, I want to uncheck high quality. And there we go. Now we have the divots with the cup cut into them, which you can see here. So I did have the layer order incorrect. I'm going to raise the cup above the divots. There we go. Now the divots are actually cutting into the shape of the cup. It's important to, with Boolean, it's important to uncheck high quality. That can give you mixed or unpredictable results. But the problem now is that I have big holes in the cup, and basically that means that the bottom inner shape that I made in the original loft, which is right here, is too large. If I bring the size down, that'll bring the inside of the cup inward, and then my divots or my dimples won't cut into and create a complete hole in the cup. We don't want that. So now it's just a matter of taking these different arrays and of course raising them up so that they don't intersect at the very bottom edge of the cup. I don't want that kind of thing going on. And I'm just going to keep changing some values. Sorry, I changed the wrong value. Bottom inner, I want to change that to about 7.25 centimeters across. And let's see, my first array, these dimples are pushed too far in, I think, on the cup, so I'm going to raise the radius to about 8.4, and so on. So I invite you to go ahead and adjust it from there. Now you're going to notice that on the back of your cup, you start to lose some of the dimpling and some of the divots. But there's always a way to adjust it. I'm going to take this entire divot group, and what I want to do is shear it, because some of these divots on the left side are too low. They should be slanting up toward the top of the cup. So I need a shear effect. I'm going to take shear, and I will make a group out of the divots, even though they're already a group, and I'm going to place the shear effect inside that group. Now, I'll be able to, let's call this sheared divots. Now with shear in there, I'll be able to raise one end of the divots, and they'll be lined up with the angle of the cup. I'm going to take sheared divots out of the Boolean just for a moment so that we can work more quickly. I need to zoom out because the shear effect is represented by this large purple square. It's very large. I need to shrink that down. I'm going to select shear and shrink it down to, I'm going to make it unlimited and shrink it down to 10 by 10 by 10. There we go. Now it's much smaller and we can work at scale. So here's an example of what shear does. If you go ahead and alter the strength of the shear, you'll start to see things lean. And they're leaning like they're being blown by wind. And of course I don't want them to be blown sideways, so I'm going to actually change or rotate the shear itself. I'll hit R and I'll rotate the shear 90 degrees. There we go. So that these divots are raised up towards the back of the cup, just like that. Hopefully this will help them match the contour of the cup a little bit better. So now I'm going to show the cup again. This is kind of a close match, okay, but we're not going to worry about perfection right now. I just want to show you how these Booleans and Loft NURBS work together. And I'm going to go ahead and take sheared divots and drop it right back into the Boolean. But remember, I might have to change the order so that cup is on top. Okay, so now I have my cup with divots that actually shear up toward the top back with the same angle. All right, enough of that. Let's move on to some of the French fries. We've got our cup made. Let's not move on to the French fries. I want to show you first how to make the chrome surface. So I'm going to create a new material by double-clicking here, and I'll apply it to the Boolean, which I'm going to name fry cup right now. Right away it takes on that that white color from a standard material. I'm going to name this chrome. We're going to take away the color, and on the reflectance tab we're going to go ahead and hit the add button right here. Actually, I'm going to alter the default specular. I want the width to be very thin, and fall off to be a little bit thinner, and the specular amount to be high, because remember, this is going to be chrome. It's going to be very reflective. It's going to need to be. I'll hit the add to add a second layer of reflection, and I'll use reflection legacy. Right away it starts to look like chrome in the preview. When we rendered, nothing happens. This is because the cup is now reflecting basically nothingness, like it's floating in space and there's no light source or anything around for it to reflect. So that's why I like to create a floor in my composition and create a new material really fast, drop it onto the floor, and I just want the floor to be a checker pattern. I'll use surfaces checkerboard, and I'll change it to basically shades of gray, just like that. My frequency I'll change to 30 and 3 and 3, sorry, maybe 5 and 5. Now when I hit Shift R to render, now my cup is a little bit more visible. It's actually reflecting the floor environment around it. We're not actually going to use the floor later in our animation, but it's nice to have while we work so that we can see our changes happen live. Another good idea is to insert some lights, but we'll worry about that some other time. So now it's time to make one of our French fries. Let's jump over to Photoshop, and I'm going to show you some of these fries. I picked a photograph from the web that is very high resolution so that we can see the texture on these fries. First of all, they're golden and delicious looking. They're shades of yellow, shades of orange, and they're lit very positively from the top. So how are we going to make these fries? Same thing, I'm going to make a Loft NURBS. Basically where my arrow is pointing right now into the center of the fry, I'm going to make one rounded rectangle, and then there's going to be 2 rounded rectangles on the ends, which I will turn. So let's do that right now. Back in Cinema, I'm going to hide my fry cup for the moment so that we can work without any kind of delay. Now I can work a little bit more quickly. From the Shapes panel, I'm going to pull out a rectangle, and we can't see it right away, of course, because it's huge. I can turn off the floor too. Sorry, I've lost it. There we go. Here's our rectangle. I'll name this middle. This is going to be the middle of the French fry. And no French fry I've ever seen has been 400 centimeters. I think usually they're at best 2 centimeters. And the fries that we had at Red Robin were not like this. They were steak fries. They weren't perfectly square. The steak fries they have at Red Robin are, you can see here, they're not perfectly square. They're a little bit shorter on one side. So we're dealing with rectangles here. Jump back to Cinema. And I'll go with 2 centimeters by a ½ centimeter. And I'll zoom way back in. So this is the start of the profile of my fry right here. And of course that's the middle. I'm going to rotate it so that it's facing upward, because ultimately the fries in my animation were facing up as if they were being held inside the cup. So here's the middle of our fry. I'm going to hit E, I'm going to hold Command, and I'm going to push this up, and that'll make a duplicate. This is going to be the top, and I'll make one more duplicate down here, and this is going to be the bottom. And it is important to have this actually be below the middle. There we go. You don't really have to be evenly spaced. You can see that this one isn't. But either way, this is going to be the start of our fry. I'm going to take these 3 shapes and I'm going to place them inside a Loft NURBS, a lot like I did with the rings to make the cup. There we go. So now we get this sort of, square sort of thing. And you might be asking, why didn't you just do that with, by making a rectangle? Well, the reason is I want to be able to take this top section of the fry and I want to rotate it like this to give us a nice sort of chisel at the top. And the same thing with the rectangle at the bottom, I want to rotate it this way to give us that chisel that sometimes fries have. If we go back to Photoshop, you can see that they have a bit of an angle, and that's because that's the outside of the potato. So you can't really do that with a regular rectangle, not in Cinema 4D Lite anyway. I'm sure in Cinema 4D, the full version, you can rotate surfaces. Another thing that I like to do is maybe give them a little bit of rotation this way, and I'll take the top one and give it a little bit more rotation that way, so that they're a little bit uneven. And I also like to take the middle and scale it differently than the other ones. Maybe I'll make it a little bit fatter, like this. Okay, I'll also, on all of these rectangles, turn on rounding and make that maybe about 1/4 of a centimeter. And the same thing on the top, and the same thing on the bottom. There we go. So now we have this sort of, I don't know, it's not fat enough, but we have the start of our fry shape right there. There, it's already looking like a delicious fry. The next important thing to remember, the next important thing to do is select your Loft NURB and increase the amount of subdivision. I believe I'm going to go with U. Yeah, I'll leave that at 30, but mesh subdivision on the V axis, which is your vertical axis, I want something like 75 at least, because the next thing that I'm going to do is bend the shape of the fry, and I can't really do that by just taking the top and moving it. You get some kind of bend, but not a highly controllable bend. So I want to use the bend effect and group it together with the loft. I'll take the bend and loft, and I'll right click and group them together. And then this is going to be my French fry, my steak fry. Sorry about that. Can't type. So where's our bend? What's going on here? Nothing's happening. Again, that's because Cinema 4D by default likes to make things very large, and that's okay. I'm going to take the size of this bend, and I'm going to hit T and just shrink it way down, just so it's just about the size of my fry, just so I can see it. It literally, it can be this big. It can be, you can leave it at 250 if you want, because we're going to take the bend, change its mode to unlimited, and then we'll turn up the strength, and we'll see what happens. As I turn up the strength here, you can see that it's bending, and that's not the direction that I want it to bend, but I just want to demonstrate. It's important to keep your Loft NURB subdivision high. Otherwise, if I lower this number, you start to see that it becomes stepped and weird. So I'm going to leave this maybe at 50. That's going to be enough. These don't have to be perfectly smooth. I'll go back to my bend, and I'll lower the amount back down a little bit. But I want it to be leaning and bending this way. So I'll actually rotate the bend effect by hitting R and just rotating it along this axis. I want to rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. Now we have a steak fry. It's probably bent a little too much at this point. That seems fine. It's easily changeable later on. Again, we're going with the principle of just making one shape and cloning it. So we've got our steak fry. It looks delicious already. So now let's start making our material. I'll double click, and I'm making a new material. I'll lay it on top of the steak fry, and we'll open up the panel, and we'll call this material fries. I want to give it some color. I want it to be that sort of golden yellow orange color. If you want, you can pull Cinema 4D this sideways, and I'm going to put this over here, over toward the right side of my screen, and then basically I will now sample colors from this area. So now I'm using the colors from real life. Alright, so there's my fry so far. It's looking a little bit better. Okay. At this point also, I like to pull out interactive render so that I can actually see the shape and see the material take effect. Luminance. If you just coat it with luminance, of course, it's going to turn stark white, and we don't want that. Let me turn off some of these other layers so that we render a little bit faster. So we're just coding this in white, and of course we don't want that. So I'll hit on the texture tab, I'll hit Fresnel. And I'm going to actually need to copy this channel by right-clicking and holding copy. And over to luminance, I will paste it. So now I have the same Fresnel going on in here. There we go. And I want this color to be a little bit darker, actually. So I'll sample sort of this dark orange in here. So now my fry has that color toward the side of the shape that is facing camera. And around the outsides, it'll have sort of a lighter color. I'm also going to add a couple of lights to my scene. Things are rendering very slow right now. I'll add a couple of lights so that we can see the light have an effect on the fry as we work. There we go. I'm going to duplicate this light by holding Command or Control on the PC and moving it to the side. Oops. There we go. So now I have my lights. I'm going to raise this one up in space and put it over here. There. And we can zoom back on our fry and have a look at the fry. I'll turn on interactive render again. Now we can see the fry start to take shape a little bit. So it's got its luminance. Now the next thing is to worry about the actual texture of the fry. So how do we get some texture on this fry? I like to go to the Displacement tab and activate it. You're not going to see any effect until you choose one of the textures. Let's just go right now with layer. This is going to allow me, this is going to do nothing basically. See, nothing, well, something extreme has happened, but I only want maybe 1 centimeter of displacement, and I want it to be done with noise. So now you can see here that there's a bit of a preview, and I just go ahead and I layer up my noise layers. You might actually find yourself having to change your loft to organic form, I think, or loop. Now loop is going to give you a kind of a tube. I don't know if you want that kind of thing. So let's leave that off for now. Caps. Sometimes you have to change this to none. No, sorry. Fillet cap, which is going to give us some crazy results. Now I'm going to leave the caps on none. So here's what's happening. Our Loft NURBS, which is a subdivided object, has 50 subdivisions. I'm going to increase that to about 300, about 100 this way. And you're going to see some smoothness happen on the shape. If you go back to your Displacement tab and change the displacement scale down to the global scale down about something like 5, now your displacement map is going to be a lot smaller, and then you're going to see, you're going to get a little bit closer to the result you might want. I'm going to lower the contrast of this noise so it's not as extreme. Shrink it down a little bit more, and I'm actually going to increase the global size. This noise that I'm putting on is only a very general noise to just push the radius of the object out, and you might actually have to experiment with the height of your intensity of your displacement to push it in the correct direction. Bear with me. Sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's negative. You can also take your middle object and you can change the radius this way. Oops. And you can change the height of it as well. There we go. If you run into this sort of tube phenomenon up here that I'm running into right now, then you'll have to experiment with different settings on your Loft NURB. I think it's loop. Or, no, it might be organic form. It might be caps. Well, I don't know. I didn't have this problem last time. Sorry about that. Anyway, give it a second to render. Let's go ahead and edit our material again. So your first layer of displacement is going to give you this this sort of noise right here, this shape. But if we add another one by hitting shader noise and then changing its mode to something like add, now it's going to push our shape in all kinds of weird directions. All right, notice that it pushed it way out. That's fine. I'm going to go into my noise control panel, and I'm going to shrink it down to about 15. And back to this displacement tab, I like to take the first noise and change it to sparse convolution, just for some general sort of turbulence. And then in my second noise layer, I want there to be a little bit less contrast and a little bit less brightness. And so now, let's see if we shrink this down really small. Now we start to get, maybe 300. Now we start to get this, hopefully semi-realistic fry texture, or displacement rather. There we go. So it's a little tiny bit more realistic. Play around with some of the values until you find the one that is right for you. All right, and then once that is pretty much done, you can go over to your bump, and you can pretty much do the same thing. So on the bump panel, you need to activate a noise. I'll choose noise, and now you're going to see a bump map take effect on our steak fry. So it's a little bit different so far. I'm going to actually hit, I'm going to increase the strength of our bump map. Back in displacement, I'm actually going to reduce the contrast. Back to the bump panel. I'm going to use a nice bump for fried foods called gnocchi. And in the preview window, it looks a little bit like this, and of course it's far too large, so I'll shrink it down to about 10%, and there we go. Now we're going to start seeing some actual, an actual bump map on our fry. Let's see it from this angle. All right, so it's displaced a little too much. We'll go back to the displacement tab, and this fry's looking a little too fat, like it's an entire potato. And I'm going to take this to -0.5 so it doesn't get pushed out so hard. There we go. Back to the bump map. We can edit our gnocchi. You can also change the colors of the bump map if you want to. It has a subtle effect. And I'm going to hit, in the main panel of bump, I'm going to select layer, so that now we're able to have several layers of noise. I'm going to make another layer of noise and make that overlay. And this one I'm actually going to give a little bit of color. So I'll click on it, and for color 1, I'll use the darkish orange from the picture. And for color 2, I'm going to sample the brighter yellow, which is already used on this fry. And we wait a second, and now we have, so this is our sort of second preview. Things are looking a little bit glassy at this point. It does look a tiny bit shiny. So maybe if I turn off luminance, you're going to see a totally different fry. And we don't want that. We might want diffusion turned on. Let's wait for the preview. No, that doesn't do it either. Anyway, experiment with some of these different values, and your bump map is going to, depending on the strength, is going to give you some really nice, texture, like fried food typically has this sort of craggly texture in color as well. All right. the Displacement tab, you can feel free to add as many displacements, shaders as you want. So let's go ahead and turn off interactive render, so we make things a little faster. And now we have our steak fry made. So that's our one steak fry. At this point, what I like to do is what I did on the original is I dropped that steak fry into an array. And of course the array is huge, but I need this to be about 3 centimeters. There we go. Now all my fries are clumped together. And it's only 7 copies. So right away I see that they are not really at the correct angle. It's sort of making this teepee shape. So I'm going to enable axis. I'm going to choose the steak fry and I'm going to rotate it. So it's sort of facing out a little bit like that. And I rotated some of them this way too. There we go. And that's the general principle. I made one array, I duplicated it, and I just made more steak fries, made more copies, and I rotated them basically in random different directions. And then, of course, varied their height, sorry, not their height, but their actual position with different frequencies and different amplitudes, maybe 1.5. You can take your second array and you can move it upwards if you want to. And it looks really strange right now, but once you render, then you're going to start to see that you have multiple fries facing multiple different directions. Your render might be really slow if you add a lot of bump map and a lot of different displacement maps, so be aware of that. Also, if you have ambient occlusion on, you're probably going to be waiting forever for just one frame to render. So let's see if I can get a render. It doesn't seem to be wanting to do it. I'm going to show my fry cup again and my floor. Okay, so those are back and visible now. And you can see how slow things have gotten. My original drawing was not this slow. I really don't know why this is going so slow. And I'll orbit around like this. And the fries are, I can see now, are a little bit too small. And they're a little bit too low on the horizon. So that's basically it. I mean, I made one fry, I made one texture, and then I went ahead and duplicated the fry over and over until I had a cup full of fries, just like this. So that, in a nutshell, is how you can create a Chrome object with some divots cut into it using Loft NURBS and Booleans. And then you can use Loft to create the French fry and use some careful, make some careful choices on your fry texture to create the French fry itself. Here's a render. Let's see if this works. I think my computer is going to explode. So I might have to cut the, oh, here we go. There we go. So that's what it looks like when it renders. These look very scary. Anyway, I hope your fries turn out a little bit better than mine. They seem to turn out just fine the first time around, but I'm not having the same luck. It just shows you that I'm human and I don't get it right 100% of the time. But I hope your fries turn out better looking than mine. So, good luck with this one. I always encourage everybody to open up the program and experiment with every single setting and see what kind of results you get when you mix and match things and settings together. So this has been Nick with Creation Army TV. Thanks for watching this very long-winded tutorial about Red Robin's bottomless, delicious golden fries. Thanks. Take care.